Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for being here for your second meeting in May. It seems like time is flying by. Wow. Anyway, with that, I will call this meeting to order. Please stand with us for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Next up is roll call. Start voting, please. Holly?
All councilors present and a quorum has been declared.
Thank you. Next up, we have agenda approval. Are there any additions or deletions to the agenda? Holly?
Yes, there is. The presentation that was going to be done by the migrant education students is no longer going to be on the agenda tonight. They were unable to make it.
Thank you, Holly.
With that,
Councilor
Mayor,
Grego?
with that, I'll make the motion we approve the agenda as amended.
I second.
I have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion on the agenda? You know, start voting, please. Holly?
The motion carried unanimously.
Thank you. Next up, we have citizen comment. Alamosa City Council welcomes your comments. Citizens wishing to speak may obtain a speaker card through the city clerk at the start of the meeting. Tonight I have one card. We welcome your comments. It's a 3-minute speech with Mr. Bill Brooks, Matt Bishop, and Alicia Gallegos. Please come to the podium. Thank you for being here, Mr. Brooks. There's a button there somewhere.
On the bottom where it connects in.
Please tell us your name, and your address is optional.
Speak. Okay.
Very good.
My name is Bill Brooks. I'm a counselor at Ortega Middle School. Just tonight, we just wanted to show off a little bit of a group that we have there called SAD. It's not the emotion. It stands for Students Against Destructive Decisions. A takeoff of MAD, Mothers Against Drunk Driving. A couple of our students here. We have 2 students here, and the quality of the students that we have here makes up for the quantity. We have about 25 or 30 students very active in SAD. We invited the mayor and some others to join us for an activity last Wednesday. Thank you, Mayor, for coming to our activity at Carroll Park. It was a celebration of what's called Kick Butts Day, butts for cigarette butts. We picked up cigarette butts from Ortega Middle School to Carroll Park and at Carroll Park, and we have some pictures. Go ahead and pass those down for the council members, please. Some of the members and some of the things that we picked up, we picked up about 12 bags of cigarette butts and other cigarette, tobacco, and tobacco products. There has been, because of OMS in years past, there's been signs put up at Carroll Park, no tobacco products in this park, and so we celebrate this each year. I think that we had approximately the same number of cigarette butts as we did last year, unfortunately, but really appreciate the mayor coming, and this is a great group of kids at OMS. I really appreciate them working hard to do this. So,
Thank you, Mr. Brooks. Council, do we have any comments for Mr. Brooks? Councilor Daniel.
I just wanted to say thank you. SAD is a fantastic group. You guys do a great job. And so all the students you have involved are fantastic. So thank you for the work that you're doing with your peers. You're doing a wonderful thing for our community.
Councilor Hensley.
Do you both feel comfortable introducing yourself to us? And then if you could let us know, what is the biggest thing that rewards you from doing this?
Knowing that we'll make good decisions when we're older.
And what's your name?
Alicia Gallegos,
And what grade are you in?
7th.
Thank you.
My name is Matthew Bishop, and I just feel like I am doing something good for the environment and people around me. And I am in 6th grade.
Thank you, both of you, and also to all of your classmates. We really appreciate it.
Thank- Thank you, Mr. Brooks, and thank you, Alicia, and thank you, Matt, for being here. Certainly appreciate it. Keep us in the loop and let us know what you're doing. Thank you so much. Thank you. Next up, we have a ceremonial item. It's Mental Health Month proclamation. I know I've got this proclamation in here. I will read this mental health proclamation, and or maybe you should just come up and tell us a little bit about this before I read it, and we will go with that. Please tell us who you are, and your address is optional.
I'm Clarissa Woodworth. I work at San Luis Valley Behavioral Health Group. I'm at 52 Cascade. We come every month. May is Mental Health Month. The theme this year has really been about how brave people are that reach out and ask for help, and how we appreciate that. And our ask is that we as a community make it easier for people to be brave, because it's so hard for them to do. And so the more we all know about it, we support it, we can make that stigma go away, the more people will get help. And so that's our big push.
Thank you. With that, I will read the proclamation. Mental Health Month 2016. Whereas mental health is essential to everyone's overall health and well-being, and whereas all people experience times of difficulty and stress in their lives, and whereas prevention is an effective way to reduce the burden of mental health conditions, and whereas there is a strong body of research that supports specific tools that all Americans can use to better handle challenges and protect their health and well-being, and whereas mental health conditions are real and prevalent in our nation, and whereas with early and effective treatment, those individuals with mental health conditions can recover and lead full, productive lives, and whereas each business, school, government agency, healthcare provider, organization, and citizens share the burden of mental health problems and has a responsibility to promote mental wellness and support prevention efforts. Therefore, I, Joseph P. Lucero, on behalf of your Alamosa City Council, do hereby proclaim May 2016 as Mental Health Month in the city of Alamosa, Colorado. As the mayor, I also call upon the community, government agencies, public and private institutions, businesses, and schools in Alamosa to recommit our community to increasing awareness and understanding of mental health, the steps our citizens can take to protect their mental health, and the need for physical health concerns before they reach a mental health crisis. And I will sign this, and I will ask Councilor Daniel to present this to you. Council?
We have to go in our order, so we don't mess up the chairs.
Just get around that post over there. That's the big thing. Next up, we have consent calendar A. The consent calendar allows multiple actions with one motion. Consent calendar A contains routine items which have been recommended for action by staff or advisory boards. Council may remove a consent calendar item for separate consideration. Tonight we have 4 items. We will approve the minutes of the meeting of May 4th, 2016, receive the April 2016 monthly reports, request by Mr. Eddie Lopez for a permitted use by special review to allow a residential use group R-1 in a commercial business zone, and a request of Eduardo and Jennifer Macias for permitted use by special review to allow outdoor dining in a commercial business district and to allow an indoor eating and dining establishment use group C-22 in an industrial zone district. I will entertain a motion or questions. Councilor Vihil.
Thank you, Mayor. I don't see any questions, so I'm going to ask that we move and approve consent calendar A.
I second.
I've got a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion on consent calendar A? Seeing none, start voting, please. Holly?
The motion carried unanimously.
Thank you, Council. We'll move on then to regular business. Business brought forward by city staff. Tonight we have Public Works. Consideration of the creation of a full-time fleet mechanic, 1 position, and first reading of ordinance 10-2016, an ordinance amending in part the established pay plan for city officers and employees as referred to in section 15-2 of the City of Alamosa Code of Ordinances concerning personnel rules and regulations and pay plan for city officers and employees. Thank you, Pat.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Good evening. As we discussed at the retreat, prompted by complaints from department heads regarding slow turnaround times at the fleet maintenance facility, a study was commissioned by the city in 2001 to identify appropriate staffing levels and to help optimize fleet maintenance activities. The study identified 2 major conditions that needed to be addressed. 1, the age and general condition of the fleet was requiring more maintenance time and effort than would be required for a newer fleet. And secondly, the mechanics were spending too much of their time doing paperwork, ordering parts, answering the telephone, talking to salesmen. This prompted the creation of a service writer position that would be responsible for the day-to-day activities, parts ordering, troubleshooting, scheduling, etc., that were keeping the mechanics from actually working on the vehicles. This service writer position was filled in 2003, and an additional mechanic was hired to backfill the new service writer's old position. In 2009, the service writer position became vacant and was never filled, once again leaving just 2 people in the shop. Since the study was conducted in 2001, the city has added 91 pieces of equipment to the responsibilities of the Fleet Maintenance Department. We've also added the changing and repair of all of our light and heavy-duty tires, and the fleet mechanic supervisor has been shouldered with more responsibilities specific to budgeting, citywide fleet planning, and new vehicle specification preparation. Tim and Aaron have done a wonderful job working to maintain the effective service levels, but with the seemingly endless additions to the fleet, they are starting to struggle.
Thank you, Pat. Council, do we have any questions or comments for Pat?
Council, I would just add, the fiscal impact to this is From an annual basis, the total cost when benefits are included is $31,774. That is an annual cost, so the anticipated impact to the 2016 budget, because this obviously was not included as part of that budget, is approximately $18,535, depending on when the person actually gets hired and those considerations. We would obviously then include the full cost in the 2017 budget and moving forward if approved.
Thank you, Heather. And my understanding is that we are basically one person down in that department, aren't we? We have done away with one position many months ago, and this
In
is just
2009.
Okay. Thank you, Pat. Appreciate it. Councilor Grego.
I guess my question is, how would we proceed on something like this? Because we're asking also for a first reading. Eric, but
So what we have done is, for expediency purposes, we have advertised and started that process because that can, there you are, Counselor, sorry.
Thank you.
I'm used to you sitting over here.
I'm usually sitting on it. I tried to seats with Ty this time.
Yeah,
So
you throw me
look
for
at
a
Ty.
loop. We've started that process, but obviously if council were to decide not to move forward with this, we would just end the advertisement, not fill the position. The ordinance that's in front of you allows us to add this, and from a budget amendment perspective, would that come at a later time, Amanda? We would do a budget amendment at a later time, sometime this year, for a more full amount, an accurate amount. We would do a budget amendment.
And like Heather said, we have started advertising. We wanted that to correlate with TSJC graduation.
Councilor Stefano.
I move that we pass ordinance number 10, 2016 on first reading and setting it for public hearing on June 1st, 2016.
Second.
I've got a motion and a second on ordinance number 10-2016. Is there any further discussion?
one comment, Mayor. Do we have to approve the position and then come back and amend the ordinance? Eric?
Charlie, that's a good question.
Yeah.
I think that what you're needing to do tonight is approve the creation of that position.
Position first.
The ordinance, I don't believe, creates that position. It provides for that position, and it provides for pay for that position. So you don't need to create the position by ordinance. You can just move tonight for creation of the position and approval on first reading of the ordinance.
Okay, maybe Mike wants to.
Councilor Grego?
No, I says maybe Mike wants to amend the motion to kind of put in what our city attorney has suggested.
I say we go forward with it and set it for a reading on June the 1st.
Very good. So your motion is to approve the creation of that position of Fleet Mechanic 1, I think is the title, and to approve ordinance number, whatever it was.
10-2016, Counselor.
On first reading, and as you say, set it for a public hearing at the next meeting.
Thank you, Councilor Stefano. Is there a second? Was there a second? Yes. Councilor Vigil, there's a second. I've got a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion or questions? Seeing none, start voting, please. Holly?
The motion carried unanimously.
Thank you, Council. We'll move on to City Manager Legal. We've got a couple of issues this evening. We've got a recommendation to Governor Hickenlooper to veto House Bill 16-1302 and a presentation on the Essential Air Service recommendation.
Thank you, Council. I'll
Who is
address
that?
the.
Thank you. Thank you, Eric.
I'll address the issue with House Bill 16-1309. Heather was just informing me that at the CML meeting this morning that issue was addressed. So I don't know how much background you need from me, but the concern that city staff has with respect to this House bill, which has been approved by both chambers, is that it is addressing a need that in the context of Alamosa and many communities in Colorado doesn't exist. It's addressing a need somehow for appointment of court-appointed counsel at first appearance for defendants, assuming that those defendants are in custody at first appearance. And our municipal court, like many throughout the state, do not place people in custody prior to their first appearance. The nature of municipal offenses really doesn't warrant that kind of treatment of suspects and arrestees. So the only time any person in the Alamosa court system will have been in custody prior to a first appearance would be if they didn't show up for their first appearance, and not only didn't show up for their first appearance, but didn't show up for a rescheduled first appearance after being given a courtesy notice that they missed their first one and it has been rescheduled for them. So it's creating an expense for the city of Alamosa, which is significant, on the order of $20,000 a year, because we cannot have, we don't have the legal resources to have a defender, a court-appointed defender, standing by for that kind of thing. So I know CML is actively involved in this, and I presume there are other cities than Alamosa petitioning the governor about this. What staff is proposing for council's consideration is that council authorize the mayor similarly to petition the governor for a veto of this bill for those reasons, and you have a draft letter in front of you in your materials.
Thank you, Eric. Questions or comments? Councilor Daniel?
Thank you, Mayor. I believe that this letter, I would absolutely be in support of it. I think that this is an unreasonable expectation of municipalities and municipal court systems. And so I appreciate the work that staff has done and that CML has provided us.
Councilor Vihil?
So with that, I move that we approve the authorization of the mayor to submit the attached letter to Governor Hickenlooper recommending the veto of HB 16-1309.
Councilor Stefano?
Second.
I've got a motion and a second on the recommendation to veto HB 16-1302 and authorize the mayor to sign that letter. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, start voting, please. I guess I'll have to go back here. Hold on. Start voting, please. Holly?
The motion carried unanimously.
Thank you, Council. We'll move on then to the essential air service recommendation. That is Heather. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. The County of Alamosa and the Airport Board are in somewhat of a unique situation this year in that for the Essential Air Service Provider contract, they actually received more than one proposal. In some of the previous years, they've just received the one, and that is from the current provider, Great Lakes. As you can see in the attached letter, Great Lakes once again made a proposal to retain the Essential Air Service, as did Boutique Air. I was able to attend both meetings that the Airport Board held in order to receive public input and to kind of discuss what those proposals looked like. From talking to the public, listening to the presentations that were made during those two meetings, for me, it overwhelmingly, the point that was made is that there is demand and there is a strong need for reliable air service. In regards to economic development, we need to make sure that we have an airport with essential air service. It's also something that if we do not maintain certain levels, you can lose that. And once you're out of the program, I'm not sure you can get back in. So trying to find that reliable service is critical. We heard from many larger employers that they have significant amount of need to use the air service, but because of the unpredictability that has occurred the last few years, they simply don't consider it, and they do not use it. And I think that's obviously hurt the numbers, and you can there's a drop in the usage that's occurred over the last 3 years. Something that came through the presentation with Boutique Air is they are new to the essential air service type of business. They're not necessarily new to the aviation business, but to providing this. They are fairly straightforward in acknowledging that a lot of the contracts they've taken over have been some from Great Lakes. What really stood out from their presentation was their completion rate, which I believe was 99 point something, which when you're in the situation we're in, and that seems to be the Achilles heel, that was very, very impressive. One of the questions I asked them is because, the completion rate can be defined in different ways. Sometimes if it's something that's outside their control, such as weather or those types of things where a cancellation might need to be made, what is their process? Because from listening to people with concerns on Great Lakes, that seems to be where the breakdown is. When their flights are on time and making the connections, people love flying out of Alamosa. It's when there's going to be a cancellation that there seems to be the big breakdown with a customer service perspective. The answer from Boutique Air is they seem to have a very robust system in place from a notification and a very customer service-centric focus on making sure that the customers still feel as if they are getting taken care of. And I think that is critical to this evaluation as well. Alamosa County and the Airport Board ended the last meeting requesting that from the public and any of the agencies from the public, if there is a recommendation between one of the two, that they would highly recommend that we send in a letter. And so since that is due before May 25th, we wanted to get this on your agenda and allow you some time to discuss it and possibly submit a letter in support of one of these carriers. I know Charlie, or Councilor Grego, is on the airport board and was able to hear both of those. And then a few other councilors were at some of the meetings. And obviously, you guys hear your own stuff out in the community in regards to the service. So,
Thank you, Heather. Councilor Grego?
I guess a couple of comments, and what I did was I provided everybody with a hard copy so you could look at where exactly they fly from. This is a company out of California. And as Heather was saying, that the reliability is what was one of the real strong points in their presentation. Also, another thing that really caught a lot of people's eyes and remarks was they fly to Albuquerque as one of the options. So, and afterwards, we got an opportunity to fly, and you'll see a picture of the 9-passenger plane that they have in there, and it's a really comfortable plane. And so. Like Heather was saying, the bids are so close. I think they're within so much that with these extra letters of recommendation would kind of help them out in a competition of this kind. So,
Councilor Hensley?
So I also went to the meetings, and I was very impressed with Boutique Air. One of the things that I was also, on top of everything that was said already, is the fact that they have on the plane, and I forget what it's called, but there's a device on the plane, so with some of the weather situations, they can still land where Great Lakes cannot land, and so that also helps with their completion rate, which is awesome. And then I'm going to be honest, I really felt they were hungry for the business. I felt like they really want it. They are about customer service, the questions that were asked about customer service. And also the other thing that impressed me is they pay their pilots well. And that was one of the things that came up, is that they pay their staff, and that's important in the sense of having a good culture within an organization. Is if you're paying your staff well, then they want to stay, where the other airlines, that is a bit of an issue, and why they can't keep their pilots and their staff is because they don't pay as well. And so they look at that more as a step to the next job. And so anyway, for a lot of those things, I really think it's time to make that change. We have somebody who's hungry for it. And so I guess my question is, can we recommend that the letter comes from the city, or does this need to come from each of us individually?
The mayor.
What I would imagine is that it would come from the city and signed from the mayor.
Councilor Stefano?
I also have studied, analyzed their records, Great Lakes and Boutique, and I find Boutique Airlines really an upstanding company, and I like their Albuquerque flight and all that stuff. Their planes are really up, their aircraft are up to date, and I think that we should authorize the mayor to write that letter.
Councilor Vihil.
Thank you, Mayor. One question I had, and I think we've talked about this a little bit as a council, is the amount of hours that pilots need to have their wings and fly. If someone can help me out, wasn't that 15,000 hours? 1,500? Okay. Do the pilots meet that for Boutique? I would assume so, correct?
Because of the plane that they're flying, and if you saw a picture of the plane, it's a single plot, they're able to get around that. I think they only have to fly 1,200 hours. So they're able to get that. And they also answer the question that if they need a larger plane, they're able to get around and provide something like that. So they got, I forget the number of pilots that they have aboard. And just as Liz says, you have that many pilots and you're paying them well, they're retaining these pilots, and that's why they're able to do and have a 99%, to show up.
Thank you.
So,
The biggest thing that I really like about Boutique is, and it's been mentioned, is that flight to Albuquerque. That gives our people here in Alamosa and the Valley different options to get out of Denver or get out of Albuquerque. Thank you.
Councilor Grego.
one comment I'd like to make also is the fact that even though Great Lakes, has had the problems that they've had, we still appreciate the fact that they are here, because with zero air service, it'd be harder, So even though they're in a competitive basis right now, I still think, we appreciate the fact that they have serviced our community for, with the problems that they have gone through. So I think that needs to be mentioned to them.
Thank you, Councilor Grego, and we certainly appreciate you being on that airport board. It means a lot to not only the city, but the county as well, and to the residents in the city and the entire San Luis Valley. I hear just that some of these rates are very attractive initially, and so that would really encourage me to take a look at probably flying from here to Albuquerque or even from here to Denver at a reasonable rate, because sometimes when I look at some of the rates, they're very high, and sometimes I'd just rather drive there and fly out of Denver. And so this might be something that each and every one of us might want to look at as we go along and make this recommendation. And so with that, I'll entertain a motion. Thank you. Councilor Grego.
I guess I'll go ahead and make the motion that we send a letter of support on behalf of the city.
Councilor
second.
Hensley. I've got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, start voting, please. Holly?
The motion carried unanimously.
Thank you, Council. We'll then move on to committee reports. Does anyone have a committee report? We'll then move on to staff announcements. Heather?
Thank you, Mayor. I do have a few announcements, and then I know at a minimum, Pat will have an announcement, and I'm not sure if Heinz or staff, any other staff have another one. I think I mentioned from the JAG grant that we applied for in regards to offering the municipal judge a few more options from a sentencing perspective. We have been invited to go and present on that. So a group of us will be going up next week to Denver to make that presentation. It's something where it's a 10-minute presentation, and it's quite the drive, but for the amount of grant we're requesting and the difference that a face-to-face could make, we feel that it's warranted to do that. So we will be making a trip to Denver next Thursday in order to do that presentation. You've received information on the Story Walk ribbon cutting. It is this Saturday, May 21st at 10 o'clock here at City Hall. It's hard to miss the work that's been done, and I think they look great, and they look very nice. So it's exciting to see that. We did have the Colorado Municipal League Spring Outreach this morning. I always enjoy those meetings to see our valley cohorts and to catch up on what's going on in the valley and see where we can work together and strengthen those partnerships. And then it's always nice to have CML in our area talking to us about what's going on and keeping us informed. Last night, Heinz and I attended the Chamber Business Network to just discuss some of the items that the city is doing that might be of interest to them. I think the meeting went well, and we answered a lot of different questions, obviously focused on some of the potential coming out of the comp plan, the focus on the downtown and some of the visioning. We also talked about, to really take downtown to that next level, we all need to be doing our part. There's a role for the city government. There's a role for local businesses and property owners. There's a role for the chamber and the CVB. And when we have a similar vision and we're working together towards that, that's really when we're going to see some really positive movement. And so we talked about that. I think it was a really positive meeting. Yesterday, TSJC also had their first Valley Community Council. This is their effort to better reach out to the community and be a reflection of what the needs are and have better communication. They're also working on a strategic plan, and they want there to be involvement and feedback into that plan. And so it was a valley-wide representation and I think a very good discussion among the participants and Dr. Simone related to TSJC. Yesterday was obviously a very big day. We also held the first healthcare sector meeting, which was amazing. It far exceeded my expectations in regards to attendance. Again, we had people coming, I believe from Salida. We had people coming from the Valley, CEOs, the whole range of the healthcare sector. Councilor Daniel was there as one piece of that from a healthcare sector. We also had long-term care, county, home health, optometry, the hospitals, all of them were represented. And then we had them surrounded by public partners. And that was TSJC, ASU, economic development groups, the city and the county. And so it was a very positive meeting. I think the group was very much engaged. Probably the number one issue, and it looks a lot of different ways because it's fairly complex, but it's workforce. And I don't think that really surprises anyone, but it's the full range of workforce. It's attraction, it's retention, it's do we have the right pathways? Are we missing some of the training that we could have to grow our own locally? Is there internships? It's the full range from a workforce perspective. And so we're probably going to have that be the first major item that we're tackling. There are a few others, but that's, I would say, probably a majority of where the discussion focused. And it's good to see people working together when they have some of those common areas that hopefully we can come up with some solutions. So I think that was a very positive meeting. I was able to attend the open house for the crisis living room. I think what I was struck by was very much the focus on trying for any type of person and any background of person that walks in, any age, that there's a room that would help them feel comfortable and help them feel as if they can work on whatever's bringing them to that location. And a lot of time and effort and thought. And I think it's a great resource for our community. And I know Councilor Daniel can obviously say a lot more in regards to that. Wanted to thank all the officers. We were able to have the SLV Peace Officer Memorial, even though the weather was a little bit challenging, and we held it indoors and still had a good showing to show our respect for those that serve in that capacity. I also wanted to note, and we're going to do a better job in the future of promoting this as well, is we are in the middle of Public Works Week. And that is a crew that a lot of times their stuff's behind the scenes, and we realize they're there when something goes wrong. And that's part of the reason we need to do a little bit better job of promoting Public Works Week as well in the future. And so next year you can probably look for a proclamation and those types of items because they're definitely critical to the operation of a community. I met with the Upper Rio Grande Economic Development Group. There's a lot of positive aspects going on with them. It's amazing to see with the communities and the counties working together what they're accomplishing, and it's exciting. It's exciting to see anything like this, those projects going on in the valley, because it's going to benefit all of us. And they're getting creative and they're making some things happen, and it's something they really need to be proud of. And before I have Pat come up, I do want to touch just briefly. Previous to this meeting at 6, we did have a work session, and part of that work session was to share with council that through some mistakes, that the numbers that were presented for the ice rink multi-purpose facility were off, and they were significantly off. It's not a comfortable discussion or a conversation to have, and it's from a professional perspective, something that I'm not happy about having to have. But we are stewards of the public funds, and we need to be transparent when something like this happens, and straightforward. And so, tonight I just want to share that this was the first time these revised numbers were presented to council. You need some time to digest it, and then we'll circle back and see what direction we move in. In regards to the time frame, there is a little bit of an ease on that because of some of the information we uncovered. If we were to move forward, we would not be able to open for this season. So I know just from trying to schedule some other meetings, there is some traveling that's starting to go on. So we're going to get this back before you as soon as possible, but there's not a need for it to have to be tomorrow or next week. We do have a little bit of a release in regards to that time. This is obviously something, we've had the public come forward in support of this, not only vocally and from a volunteer perspective, but with their money. And it's something that I know we will be doing our due diligence. There won't be any rash decisions. And we will make sure that whatever decision council feels best from a public steward position, that everyone who's been committed to this project understands what's going on and will be handled appropriately. So, should council decide that we still move forward with this, we don't want anyone to lose their enthusiasm for it. At the same time, if it's because of these numbers being too large for us to undertake, anything that's been donated to the city would be handled appropriately and returned. And so I don't want anyone to worry while we're in this middle of flux of what do we do as we're evaluating this. At the same time, I don't want council to feel undue pressure to make a decision in a hurried manner. And so, again, an uncomfortable conversation, but it's something that we're having it, and we're trying to handle it in the best manner we can moving forward. And with that, Pat, I think I'll invite you up if you want to talk about the drainage issue. Heinz, was there anything else?
Thank you, Heather, and thank you, Pat.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. One thing we've been working on a little bit in Public Works is we were receiving some comments and some concerns from residents near the Centennial Pond about the high water level this year. We've gone in and fixed a listing fence right in here that was listing because the water had been so high that the ground had softened up underneath the fence. And a lot of people think that's just a pond, an old oxbow or something, when in reality it's a critical part of the city's storm drainage system. That pond, the water that's in this pond, starts clear down here at the Villa Mall, and it catches the heating blowdown from the Villa Mall, comes over to a lift station. It's pumped up here to this ditch. This pond here catches the back of the Walmart parking lot and the entire roof of Walmart. It goes into a ditch. It catches blowdown from Miss Martin's hot well, comes over, it gets everything basically north of Clark, all the way up here, and everything out here that has curb and gutter eventually finds its way into this system. So it flows this way, it comes into this pond, and goes across the street, comes into this pond, flows through this area, into this pond, into the cul-de-sac and out to the river. So what we did is we went through and evaluated the entire system. My first thought was groundwater levels, because the contractors have been telling us the groundwater is so high this year because of the rains we had last fall and then the wet, heavy snows we've had early this spring. We have that. We were checking with the Villa Mall to see if they've changed any practices with their well operation and their heating, as well as Jane Martin up here. I think the majority of the problem was high groundwater levels. We have gone in, we've removed a couple of culverts. We kind of looked at the design of the systems. There were some things from 30 years ago that just didn't make sense anymore, weren't functional anymore, identified some maintenance issues that hadn't been addressed, and took care of things. And we've got the water, we've dropped the water level in the Centennial Pond now over a foot in the last week. But what we will do is this area in here is an absolute jungle, and it's very flat. We shot grades in there. So what we'll do is when that freezes next winter, we've got a 40-foot storm drainage easement. When that freezes next winter, we'll get in there and clean that all out and get it flowing like it should as well.
We will also communicate with the property owners before doing that.
We will also communicate with the property owners before we do that, yes.
Thank you, Pat.
Essentially, there's a few reasons we wanted to make sure council was aware of it. The first is in case you receive any questions. I know Councilor Daniel, this is your ward, and wanted to make sure you knew some of the effort that was going on. The other part is, sometimes the layperson may not be aware of how extensive some of these collection systems are and how one can impact another one. And so just from a little bit of an educational purpose too. And then also I just want to thank Pat and his crews. I think this obviously wasn't a planned project. This was something where they responded to some input they were getting from citizens and really tried to evaluate what was going on and come up with some reasonable solutions. So I want to thank Pat and the crews who have been working on this.
Thank you, Heather. Are there any other, hold on a second.
No, sir.
Staff
There's
announcements.
no other staff announcements.
Mayor, if I might, I had a question for Heather on your chamber meeting.
Yes, sir.
I represent a bunch of the merchants up in that area. One of their biggest concerns, and I don't know if we're addressing it or not, is the 2-hour parking. And I don't know if we were enforcing that, or when are we going to start enforcing that? I know we had people that didn't want us to enforce that, but there's a whole line of merchants there that believe that should at least be enforced.
So where we are, obviously this parking discussion probably even predates me and has kind of been a few different variations. In regards to the 2-hour, we are enforcing wherever there is 2-hour, we're going to be enforcing it. It's easier for us to do it during the warmer weather months than when it's cold, but we are going to enforce what's there. The other discussion, though, that we've had with some of the merchants, and this is probably 2.5 years ago, was some of our parking limits are haphazard. Some parking lots aren't the full 2-hour. Some just have a row that's 2 hours. Some don't have any limits. So what we had started to do was to identify just where that inventory of parking was, what it was, and that was while we still had Jeanette here in our GIS position. And so that position's been vacant, which has somewhat put that on hold. However, now that we are doing the comp plan, one of the items we've talked to them about when they're focusing on the downtown is we want to have an idea about the inventory of parking that we do have. And so that is actually a fairly complex picture because there may be some that have enough parking, but people don't feel comfortable or even know where it is because of a signage. And there's other areas that may not have enough parking. And then you factor should it be 2 hour or not and all of that kind of stuff on top of it. So I think it's very important from a downtown perspective where you can sometimes have perception that may or may not match reality, that we have this assessment done and then take a look at that. And part of the process for the comp plan in the downtown portion is they're going to be visiting all the businesses and they're going to be getting the input and they're going to be looking at what's on the street, what could be reconfigured, where we're not utilizing it, and maybe where we don't have enough. And so there's a lot that will go into that from a parking perspective. But I can tell you for what we have right now in place for 2-hour parking, to my knowledge, we are enforcing that. Is that correct, Chief?
We are enforcing it today? Oh, okay.
Yes.
Because I know, I thought maybe in the wintertime, because of the weather, we weren't enforcing it.
It slows down a little bit, but during the warmer weathers, we're definitely out there on foot more often.
So people are aware that we are enforcing the 2-hour parking.
And to my knowledge, because it was a completely different conversation we were having, but the chief shared with me that some of the common offenders we have related to the employers down there, we've actually given them a heads up that we are going to be increasing
good.
enforcement. So.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Council. And so if there are no further staff announcements, we'll move on to the a decision on the new license application by Maria de Lourdes Lopez, doing business as Calvillo's Liquor. Council? Eric?
Counselor, not Counselor.
Or Eric.
Sorry, I thought you were inviting comments from your
Well,
colleagues up on the bench.
I saw you there, Eric, just having a wonderful time.
I was.
I really shouldn't
was.
have bothered you, but anyway. We're
Well,
here.
As council generally does, I have prepared proposed findings and decision for this issue, one of them granting the application and one of them denying the application. And as you look through them, you will of course notice that the findings of fact are very similar, because the facts and the comments made were what they were. Your task is to apply those facts and comments to the question of whether or not the applicant has demonstrated a need and desire for this particular application for a retail liquor establishment. And you can certainly feel free to amend any portion of these proposed findings as you see appropriate. They're just, I prepare them essentially as a baseline for you to work from. And at the same time then adopt findings of some kind, either granting the application or denying it and specifying the reasons why.
Thank you, Eric. And so we'll bring it to council for discussion. Anyone willing to take or initiate the discussion on this liquor license application? Councilor Grego.
Eric, I looked at both of those findings that you put together, and they're basically about the same. You know, I read through it, and I said, what's the difference here? And the only caption was the final paragraphs where you say either approve or disapprove. But basically, it didn't tell me why to approve, and it didn't tell me why to not approve.
Well, I tried to do that. So as I mentioned, the findings are essentially the same. I mean, the evidence was the evidence, and the question is, does it relate to the issue in front of you, the needs and desires of the neighborhood? And so, in my mind, and of course this is just me, you're the council, you make this decision, but in my mind, the question really came down to, do you, in this instance, accept the definition of the neighborhood as being the entire city of Alamosa plus a 1 mile radius, or do you, as Mr. Van de Bogard had suggested to you at the hearing, consider the fact that in this particular location there are 2 other existing retail liquor outlets within very close proximity, and treat that neighborhood, if you will, as something more limited than the entire city plus a 1 mile radius. I think that's really the issue for you, coupled with the question that stemmed really from the prior, or from the first meeting at which this was initially broached, which is, was there really evidence of a need and a desire in the neighborhood for the outlet itself?
Thank you, Eric. Councilor Daniel.
Eric, thank you for that clarification. So this is my first one of these for a new license, so I appreciate your assistance. My question is, with the other licenses that the council has granted in the past, the neighborhood hasn't changed. Like, we've identified right in ordinance that the neighborhood is the city plus a mile. So if we were to change that belief now, what would that mean for us in the future as like setting a precedent?
Well, you have, by resolution that's been in place for more than 20 years, you've made a default definition of the neighborhood as being the city limits plus a mile, but that default definition does allow for either the applicant or someone opposed to the application to suggest that a different definition of the neighborhood is appropriate. So you don't really set up, I mean, you could, if you wanted, not tonight and not in this context, but you could, if you wanted in the future, revisit that question of, do you have your default definition of a neighborhood appropriately defined? But for tonight, you have the default definition and you have the question of, is there a reason presented to consider a different definition in this case?
Councilor Griego.
One question I had, and we look at this, we look at neighborhood, and then we look at needs, and if the needs are being met right now, presently, with the type of liquor application, and if not, why isn't it being met, and do the evidence provide enough where it's not being met, where I think a person could make a decision and say, hey, well, they're not being met, so this is why I would feel that we would approve or disapprove, you know? And that's what I struggle with is the needs. Are they being met today, you know, even though the boundaries that you give, but are they being met?
And the evidence that you have that addresses that, I see as, and again, this is just my take, and I'm not a counselor.
Sure.
But I'm used to hearing these kinds of things, so I'm, giving you the benefit of, for what it's worth, of my having heard this. The applicant presented evidence of those needs and desires in the neighborhood in two ways. One was by the petitions that were presented to you, which the applicant testified were signed by people at Calvillo's restaurant who were told that the petition was for support of putting in this retail liquor establishment across the street. And the second was the testimony of Mr. Bustamante, who testified that one of the issues is the selection that's being provided, and that they wanted to focus on a broader range of liquors from further afield than you find in the current establishments in the city.
Councilor Stefano.
As a business owner, I believe in free enterprise. I know there's another liquor store there. There's one down the street. It seems to me they're taking a chance, if we were to approve this, to make a living out of this. But it's up to them if they want to pursue this. I think, even though there's a liquor store there already, it's a free enterprise. If they want to open it, I believe that they have the right to open it, and it's going to be kind of like a little war between Terry's Liquor and their liquor store, because they're going to be right across the street. But if they choose to compete, I see nothing wrong with competition. If a painter wants to live across the street from me, I have nothing to say about it. I mean, that's his choice. So that's kind of the way I look at it. It's a free enterprise, and if they want to take a chance with the other liquor store there already, they're going to compete for the money. May the winner, whoever wins, wins. That's kind of the way I'm looking at it, so I have no problem with this.
Council, I think that Councilor Grego and I have been around for many of these liquor hearings, and one of the things that rises to the top for me is needs and desires, and did they really prove their case? I guess that's what it really comes down to. Did they really prove the case that this is something that the community needs and desires? And that's really what it's all about for me. I appreciate the fact that Councilor Stefano looks at free enterprise the way he does, but this is a decision that's going to be made not by the individual investor, but by this council. And so in that, I have a real problem with the petition that was presented before council. The petition that was presented before council had 30 names, none of which really, in a sense, outlined the address of the signer, what the petition was all about, and those things are problematic in my mind. I think a petition needs to be a lot more clarified in what it says and who signs it and why they're signing it, and possibly what their address is with respect to the limits of the city. And that is the city plus a 1 mile radius. And these are the people that really should be weighing in on this. And I'm not sure that I got any of that information. And so with that, that in my mind leads to quite a few questions as to the needs and desires. And are they being met or are they not being met? And I have a real problem with that. Councilor Hensley.
Thank you, Mayor. So I kind of echo Councilor Stefano in that I am also pro competition. The idea of, I think the only people that benefit from them opening is us as the consumer, because obviously if they can compete in a way that us as a consumer thinks is better. One of the things they brought up was customer service, that they feel they can provide better customer service, which I know for all of us, it's nice to have that good customer service. I also look at it from the point of that it's an empty building right now, and this just adds another business that can help make that difference downtown. And like I say, I do support the fact that, I mean, you can look at it also, Mexican restaurants. How many Mexican restaurants do we have in town? And it kind of becomes a joke. Do we need another Mexican restaurant? But we have them, and they all do very well. We have almost on every corner in the area of Cavillos, we have a lot of Mexican restaurants. And the idea there is you look at it, and then what that does as a business, then you make sure that you have your competitive advantage so you stay successful. And so I agree that if they want to give a shot, and that idea that it would be a benefit to us, because if they give us competitive advantage and they're successful, then obviously they've done something that is a need for our community. So in my mind, I think they have things that they can offer, and to give them a shot.
Councilor Grego?
One thing also, I took a walk down there and I visited with the neighbors in that area to get their input, you know, if they were even aware that this was happening. And some of them were, I don't see how they weren't aware, but they said they weren't aware and had concerns about it. Their main concerns were the parking part of it, you know, even though they have the front parking, that was going to be a concern. One of the guys said that owns.
Councilor Grego, I just want to interject that the decision about granting or denying the application has to be based on the evidence that was presented.
Oh, already presented, okay.
At the hearing, and not your own investigation.
Oh, okay. All right, thank you.
Would you like to continue, Councilor Grego?
No, I just, you know, I think that's a very important factor, the neighborhood, and I don't think it was addressed at the hearing, you know, and so.
Councilor Vigil.
Thank you, Mayor, and I respectfully disagree. Mr. Grego, if we're saying that the neighborhood is the city plus 1 mile, I think they clearly established the needs of that.
Councilor Daniel.
Eric, this question is for you too. So it says the applicant is of sound moral character. Is that because we did a background check? Because I've seen background checks in our packets before.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Is there any further discussion on this application, council? If not, I will entertain a motion. Councilor Stefano.
I move that we authorize to grant them the license.
Councilor Hensley.
I second.
I've got a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion on the new liquor license application by Maria de Lourdes Lopez, doing business at Calvillo's Liquor? Seeing none,
Oh, I have one. Sorry.
Councilor Daniel.
I snuck in there, Mayor. I'm a slow thinker tonight, I think is my problem. I apologize.
You are fine, Councilor Daniel.
Eric, one more question. We had asked during the hearing about the training for the staff to not serve underage or to serve inappropriately. As that came up, if I am not convinced that they have the experience, does that still count, or how do I weigh that or not? That's the one I'm struggling with.
That's a good question. It did come up in the hearing, but it really is irrelevant to the question that's in front of you, which is, does this satisfy the needs and desires of the neighborhood? It comes up, hopefully doesn't come up, but if it were to come up, it would come up in front of you in the context of an enforcement action concerning service to underage.
Okay, thank you. That helps with my decision that I was struggling with.
Councilor, is there any further discussion? If not, start voting, please. Holly?
The motion carried 5-2 with Councilors Griego and Mayor Lucero casting the no votes.
Thank you. And so there, Councilor, we will move on to consent calendar B. The consent calendar allows for multiple actions with one motion. Consent calendar B contains routine items which have been recommended for action by staff or advisory boards. Council may remove a consent calendar item for separate consideration. Tonight we have the Christian Community Service Projects Special Event Permit for June the 23rd, 24th, and 25th of 2016. Council, what are your wishes? Councilor Hensley.
I motion that we approve special events permit as described below.
A second.
I've got a motion and a second on the special events permit for the Christian Community Service Projects. Is there any further discussion? Start voting, please. Holly?
The motion carried unanimously.
Thank you. We'll then move on to council comment. Anyone have a comment? Councilor Vihil.
Thank you, Mayor. I had two comments tonight. First is a big thank you to Holly, you, Mayor, Chief Chapman, Chief Oakes, and Jolene Webb. On May 9th, I took a group of 54 eighth graders to Alamosa for the reality store at Ortega Middle School, and we had a cancellation early in the morning, so I had to pick something up. And these people who I just mentioned were very willing to help with a tour of the facility, and the kids got to see the fire department and the trucks and that type of stuff, and they got to talk about city government by the mayor. And for some of those kids, that's something that they'll never do again in their life. So I just really appreciate that. And next is a thank you, and this is from people in the community. Thank you to Chief and the emergency responders for having crews set up on the south side as these trains have been coming through at certain times. They really appreciate that. Thank you.
Councilor Coleman.
Thank you, Mayor. I would like to thank all of the law enforcement agencies across the San Luis Valley who participated in Police Memorial Week, including all the first responders. It was truly a great event, and all of you who showed up to that event to show our support for our law enforcement agencies throughout the valley, as well as our first responders. Also, congratulations, Chief, to your graduating class that graduated at TSJC, from TSJC, hosted at Adams State last week. That was a great event to see so many faculty, staff, and parents and family members out there to support those fine future law enforcement officers. I also would like to let Councilor Daniel know that I appreciate the open house invitation last week for your crisis living room. Like Heather said, very nice place. I believe I would probably go there after one of these council meetings to de-stress. But it was very, very welcoming, pleasing, and I was amazed at how little simple things like having a cup of soup could help someone calm down in a crisis situation. And I think that's going to be a great addition to our city. Thank you.
Councillor Hensley.
So I'd like to add to what Councillor Coleman just said about the peace officer event, and also what a great job you did as the keynote speaker, and it was very, very inspiring. And so thank you for your speech. It was a great job. I also wanted to add about the CML event that we had today. We had representatives from many different cities, so I may have missed some, but Moffat, Saguache, South Fork, La Jara, Center, Crestone, Monte Vista, Del Norte. And I think the thing that I found was most exciting was listening to each one of them, each of the communities and what they're doing. And on top of all of it is those partnerships and how all of these communities, it seems like everybody was talking about how these partnerships are becoming stronger. And that excited me because I think that we just continue to grow. And as I see these partnerships and that there's potential for so much more. And so anyway, it was just really inspiring, and I'm really glad I went to that this morning. So thank you very much.
Very good. Councillor Daniel.
I just have a couple of announcements. I wanted to publicly thank Heather for bringing up the information about the multi-purpose facility, and I know that was difficult, and I appreciate the work that you and your entire team have been working on to kind of mitigate some of those challenges. So thank you for that and being very transparent. That helps us do our jobs. I also wanted to say thank you to Council for declaring May as Mental Health Month. I appreciate that a lot. We have needs in our community, and so it's really nice to be on a council that supports that, and for coming to our Crisis Living Room open house. So thank you. I also wanted to thank the chief for sending officers to the crisis intervention training. They were active, they were there, and that is one of the, I think, the most beneficial trainings our team members can have. So thank you for doing that for them. And Pat, happy Public Works Week. Who knew that was Public Works Week? So thank you. And then to Hines, the softball fields look awesome, and Field 4 is totally taken care of. So thank you for adding new dirt out there and having the fields ready to go, even though it's been really chilly this first week. So thanks.
And thank you. And so my comment would be that I too appreciate what what staff has done with respect to the skating rink multi-use pavilion. Many times what happens is that, our dreams are met by reality. And when our dreams are met by reality, we have to make some tough decisions. And in those tough decisions, when the buck stops, it stops with the 7 of us. And so the 7 of us are going to have to decide what our responsibility is to our community when it comes to making sure that we're going to fulfill the needs and the wants that they are asking for us to fill. And so whatever we do and whatever path we take, we will do that on behalf of the citizens of this community. And we can play the blame game all we want, but the buck stops here. We're the ones that are making the decisions, and we're the ones that are going to have to find alternatives to what the people want in our community. And so with that, therein lies our dilemma. And so we will move forward one way or the other, given the time and the energy that we need to put into this. And so I know we're all prepared to do that. And so in closing, staff, thank you very much for everything you've done and being open with us, because we don't want to undertake a project that, you know, is going to leave us out in the lurch and leave our citizens out in the lurch as well. So we'll just do the best we can and move forward with this entire issue. Councilor Grego?
Are we done? Are we,
Well, I'm done with my comment. Are you done with yours?
Yes, because we got to go into executive session. so-
Absolutely. We have a need for executive session pursuant to CRS 24-6-402-4F for personal matters, the evaluation of our city clerk.
I'll make that motion.
I will second.
I've got a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Not? Start voting, please. Holly?
Mayor Lucero, you hit the
No, I voted yes. I just hit the wrong button. I'm sorry.
Okay, if you voted yes, the motion carried unanimously.
Thank you very much. And with that, we will move into executive session, and after we are out of executive session, we'll come back into regular session. Nothing further will be discussed. Thank you.